Hello, fifth graders. Today we will be reading chapter 23 through chapter 30 of the Tale of Despereaux. In the last few chapters we read, we learned about Roscuro, a rat who is entranced by the light and thinks that light is all that is good in the world. However, as a rat, he's not supposed to think that. He's supposed to like the dark. He's supposed to enjoy torturing prisoners. And we talked a little bit about how Despereaux and Roscuro are similar in the fact that they both do not conform to what their society thinks they should do. Despereaux's society, the mouse society, thinks that he should enjoy nibbling on things and scurrying and all those types of things, and he doesn't. He enjoys stories. He enjoys people. He's in love with the Princess P. And Roscuro's society thinks that he should, like I said, enjoy the dark, enjoy torturing prisoners, not want to go upstairs. But he enjoys the light, and he absolutely loves being able to see everything around him. So neither of them conform or follow what their society thinks they should do. So we left off also with learning about the queen's death. The king had alluded to it in Despereaux's chapters, and we learned more about it in Roscuro's chapters. So we are on page 117, chapter 23, Consequences. There were, of course, dire consequences of Roscuro's behavior. Every action, reader, no matter how small, has a consequence. For instance, the young Roscuro gnawed on Gregory the jailer's rope, and because he gnawed on the rope, a match was lit in his face, and because a match was lit in his face, his soul was set afire. The rat's soul was set afire, and because of this, he journeyed upstairs seeking the light. Upstairs in the banquet hall, the Princess P spotted him and called out the word rat. And because of this, Roscuro fell into the queen's soup. And because the rat fell into the queen's soup, the queen died. You can see, can't you, how everything is related to everything else? You can see quite clearly how every action has a consequence. For instance, if, reader, you will indulge me and allow me to continue this meditation on consequences, because the queen died while eating soup, the heartbroken king outlawed soup. Because soup was outlawed, so were all the instruments involved in the making and eating of soup. Spoons and bowls and kettles. These things were collected from all the people of the kingdom of Dor, and they were piled in the dungeon. And because Roscuro was dazzled by the light of one match, and journeyed upstairs, and fell into the queen's soup, and the queen died, the king ordered the death of every rat in the land. The king's men went bravely into the dungeon to kill the rats. But the thing about killing a rat is that you must first find a rat. And if a rat does not want to be found, reader, he will not be found. The king's men succeeded only in getting lost in the dungeon's tortuous mazes. Some of them, in fact, did not ever find their way out again, and died there in the dark heart of the castle. And so, the killing of all rats was not successful. And in desperation, King Philip declared that rats were illegal. He declared them outlaws. This, of course, was a ridiculous law, as rats are outlaws to begin with. How can you outlaw an outlaw? It is a waste of time and energy, but still, the king officially decreed that all rats in the kingdom of Dor were outlaws and should be treated as such. When you are a king, you may make as many ridiculous laws as you like. That is what being a king is all about. But reader, we must not forget that King Philip loved the queen, and that without her he was lost. This is the danger of loving. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how many kingdoms you rule, you cannot stop those you love from dying. Making soup illegal, outlawing rats, these things soothe the poor king's heart, and so we must forgive him. And what of the outlawed rats? What of one outlawed rat in particular? What of Chiaroscuro? In the darkness of the dungeon, he sat in his nest with a spoon atop his head. He set to work fashioning for himself a kingly cape made out of a scrap of the red tablecloth, and as he worked, old one-eared Botticelli Rimorso sat next to him, swinging his locket back and forth, saying, "You see what comes from a rat going upstairs. I hope that you have learned your lesson. Your job in this world is to make others suffer." Yes, muttered Rescuro. Yes, that is exactly what I intend to do. I will make the princess suffer for how she looked at me. And as Rescuro worked and planned, the jailer Gregory held tight to his rope and made his own way through the darkness. And in a dank cell, the prisoner who had once had a red tablecloth and now had nothing spent his days and nights weeping quietly. High above the dungeon, upstairs in the castle, a small mouse stood alone one evening as his brothers and sisters sniffed for crumbs. He stood with his head cocked to one side, listening to a sweet sound he did not yet have a name for. There would be consequences of the mouse's love for music. You, reader, know already some of those consequences. Because of the music, the mouse would find his way to a princess. He would fall in love. And speaking of consequences, the same evening that Despereaux stood inside the castle hearing music for the first time, outside the castle, in the gloom of dusk, more consequences drew near. A wagon, driven by a king's soldier and piled high with spoons and bowls and kettles, was making its way to the castle, and beside the soldier there sat a young girl with ears that looked like nothing so much as pieces of cauliflower stuck on either side of her head. The girl's name, reader, was Miggery So. And though she did not yet know it, she would be instrumental in helping the rat work his revenge. End of the second book. So 5th grade, we now know that Rescuro's revenge that he wants is against the Princess P for calling him a rat the way that he did. Or the way that she did, excuse me. So what kind of revenge do you think he's going to plan for the Princess P? And how is this Miggery So going to help him accomplish his revenge? Take a moment and think about that. All right, book the third. So this is the third book. Gore, the Tale of Miggery So. Chapter 24. A handful of cigarettes, a red tablecloth, and a ben. Again, reader, we must go backward before we can go forward. With that said, here begins a short history of the life and times of Miggery So, a girl born into this world many years before the mouse Despereaux and the rat Chiaroscuro, a girl born far from the castle, a girl named for her father's favorite prize-winning pig. Miggery So was 6 years old when her mother, holding on to Mig's hand and staring directly into Mig's eyes, died. "Ma," said Mig, "Ma, couldn't you stay here with me?" "Oh," said her mother, "who is that? Who is that holding my hand?" "It's me, Ma, Miggery So." "Ah, child, let me go." "But I want you to stay here," said Mig, wiping first at her runny nose and then at her runny eyes. "You want?" said her mother. "Yes," said Mig, "I want." "Ah, child, and what does it matter what you are wanting?" said her mother. She squeezed Mig's hand once, twice, and then she died, leaving Mig alone with her father, who, on a market day in spring soon after his wife's death, sold his daughter into service for a handful of cigarettes, a red tablecloth, and a hen. "Papa," said Mig, when her father was walking away from her with the hen in his arms, a cigarette in his mouth, and the red tablecloth draped across his shoulders like a cape. "Go on, Mig," he said. "You belong to that man now." "But I don't want to, Papa," she said. "I want to go with you." She took hold of the red tablecloth and tugged on it. "Lord, child," her father said, "and who is asking you what you want? Go on now." He untangled her fingers from the cloth and turned her in the direction of the man who had bought her. Mig watched her father walk away, the red tablecloth billowing out behind him. He left his daughter. And reader, as you already know, he did not look back, not even once. Can you imagine it? Can you imagine your father selling you for a tablecloth, a hen, and a handful of cigarettes? Close your eyes, please, and consider it for just a moment. Done? I hope that the hair on the back of your neck stood up as you thought of Mig's fate, and how it would be if it were your own. Poor Mig, what will become of her? You must, frightened though you may be, read on and see for yourself. Reader, it is your duty. 5th grade, who is Mig's father? We've already met him. He's the prisoner that Rescuro tortured in the jail and took the red tablecloth from, remember? Chapter 25, A Vicious Circle. Miggery So called the man who purchased her uncle, as he said she must, and also, as he said she must, Mig tended Uncle's sheep and cooked Uncle's food and scrubbed Uncle's kettle. She did all of this without a word of thanks or praise from the man himself. Another unfortunate fact of life with Uncle was that he very much liked giving Mig what he referred to as, quote, a good clout to the ear. In fairness to Uncle, it must be reported that he did always inquire whether or not Mig was interested in receiving the clout. Their daily exchanges went something like this. Uncle, I thought I told you to clean the kettle. Mig, I cleaned it, Uncle. I cleaned it good. Uncle, it's filthy. You'll have to be punished, won't ye? Mig, Gore, Uncle, I cleaned the kettle. Uncle, are ye saying that I'm a liar, girl? Mig, no, Uncle. Uncle, do you want a clout to the ear then? Mig, no thank you, Uncle, I don't. Alas, Uncle seemed to be as entirely unconcerned with what Mig wanted as her mother and father had been. The discussed clout to the ear was always delivered, I am afraid, with a great deal of enthusiasm on Uncle's part, and received with absolutely no enthusiasm at all on the part of Mig. These clouts were alarmingly frequent, and Uncle was scrupulously fair in paying attention to both the right and the left side of Meg Rousseau. So it was that after a time, the young Mig's ears came to resemble not so much ears as pieces of cauliflower stuck to either side of her head. And they became about as useful to her as pieces of cauliflower. That is to say that they all but ceased their functioning as ears. Words for Mig lost their sharp edges, and then they lost their edges altogether and became blurry, blankety things that she had a great deal of trouble making any sense out of at all. The less Mig heard, the less she understood. The less she understood, the more things she did wrong. And the more things she did wrong, the more clouts to the ear she received, and the less she heard. This is what is known as a vicious circle, and Meg Rousseau was right in the center of it, which is not, reader, where anybody would want to be. But then, as you know, what Meg Rousseau wanted had never been of much concern to anyone. Goodness, 5th grade. Think about Meg Rousseau's life up to this point. Do you feel sorry for her? Do you feel bad? Do you wish her mother had lived as much as she does? And what do you think of her father for selling her to this man? Now, of course, her father didn't know what kind of man he was, but still, selling your own daughter? And what do you think of this man, Uncle? Should he have ever purchased a child? No. First of all, moral reasons, but then also, if you can't handle having a child, you probably shouldn't have one, right? In that case. Because we know, when we try something new for the first time, we practice, and it doesn't always come out the best. Doesn't mean that we should get hit in the ear. It means that we should be allowed to try again and do better. So Mig is not in a very good predicament here, right? All right, well, let's keep reading. Chapter 26, Royalty. When Mig turned 7 years old, there was no cake, no celebration, no singing, no present, no acknowledgement of her birthday at all, other than Mig saying, "Uncle, today I am 7 years old." And Uncle sang in return, "Did I ask ye how old you were today? Get out of my face before I give ye a good clout to the ear." A few hours after receiving her birthday clout to the ear, Mig was out in the field with Uncle's sheep when she saw something glittering and glowing on the horizon. She thought for a moment that it was the sun, but she turned and saw that the sun was in the west, where it should be, sinking to join the earth. This thing that shone so brightly was something else. Mig stood in the field and shaded her eyes with her left hand and watched the brilliant light draw closer and closer and closer, until it revealed itself to be King Philip and his Queen Rosemary, and their daughter, the young Princess P. The royal family was surrounded by knights in shining armor and horses in shining armor. And atop each member of the royal family's head there was a golden crown, and they were all, the king and the queen and the princess, dressed in robes decorated with jewels and sequins that glittered and glowed and captured the light of the setting sun and reflected it back. "Gore," breathed Mig. The Princess P was riding on a white horse that picked up its legs very high and set them down very daintily. The P saw Mig standing and staring, and she raised a hand to her. "Hello," said Princess P. The Princess P called out merrily, "Hello!" and she waved her hand again. Mig did not wave back. Instead, she stood and watched. And so we can see Mig on page 133. watching as they ride past, open-mouthed as the perfect, beautiful family passed her by. "Papa," called the princess to the king, "what is wrong with the girl? She will not wave to me." "Never mind," said the king. "It is of no consequence, my dear. But I am a princess, and I won't wave to her. She should wave back." Meg, for her part, continued to stare. Looking at the royal family had awakened some deep and slumbering need in her. It was as if a small candle had been lit in her interior, sparked to life by the brilliance of the king and the queen and the princess. For the first time in her life, reader, Meg hoped. And hope is like love, a ridiculous, wonderful, powerful thing. Meg tried to name this strange emotion. She put a hand up to touch one of her aching ears, and she realized that the feeling she was experiencing, the hope blooming inside of her, felt exactly the opposite of a good clout. She smiled and took her hand away from her ear. She waved to the princess. "Today is my birthday," Meg called out, but the king and the queen and the princess were by now too far away to hear her. "Today," shouted Meg, "I am 7 years old." Chapter 27, A Wish. That night, in the small dark hut that she shared with Uncle and the sheep, Meg tried to speak of what she had seen. "Uncle," she said, I saw some human stars today." "How's that?" "I saw them all glittering and glowing, and then there was a little princess wearing her own crown and riding on a little white tippy-toed horse." "What are you going on about?" said Uncle. "I saw a king and a queen and an itty-bitty princess," shouted Meg. "So?" shouted Uncle back. "I would like," said Meg shyly. "I wish to be one of them princesses." "Ha!" laughed Uncle. "Ha! An ugly, dumb thing like you? You ain't even worth the enormous lot I paid for you. Don't I wish every night that I had back that good hen and that red tablecloth in place of you?" He did not wait for Meg to guess the answer to this question. "I do," he said. "I wish it every night. That tablecloth was the color of blood. That hen could lay eggs like nobody's business." "I want to be a princess," said Meg. "I want to wear a crown." "A crown!" Uncle laughed. "She wants to wear a crown." He laughed harder. He took the empty kettle and put it atop his head. "Look at me," he said. "I'm a king. See my crown? I'm a king just like I always wanted to be. I'm a king because I want to be one." He danced around the hut with the kettle on his head. He laughed until he cried. And then he stopped dancing and took the kettle from his head and looked at Meg and said, "Do you want a good clout to the ear for such nonsense?" "No, thank you, Uncle," said Meg. But she got one anyway. "Look here," said Uncle, after the clout had been delivered. "We will hear no more talk of princesses. Besides, whoever asked you what you wanted in this world, girl?" The answer to that question, reader, as you well know, was absolutely no one. Chapter 28, To the Castle. Years passed. Meg spent them scrubbing the kettle and tending the sheep and cleaning the hut and collecting innumerable, unaccountable, extremely painful clouts to the ear. In the evening, spring or winter, summer or fall, Meg stood in the field as the sun set, hoping that the royal family would pass before her again. "Gor, I would like to see that little princess another time, wouldn't I? And her little pony, too, with his tippy-toed feet." This hope, this wish that she would see the princess again, was lodged deep in Meg's heart. Lodged firmly right next to it was the hope that she, Miggery So, could someday become a princess herself. The first of Meg's wishes was granted in a roundabout way when King Philip outlawed soup. The king's men were sent out to deliver the grim news and to collect from the people of the kingdom of Dor their kettles, their spoons, and their bowls. Reader, you know exactly how and why this law came to pass, so you would not be surprised as Uncle was when one Sunday a soldier of the king knocked on the door of the hut that Meg and Uncle and the sheep shared and announced that soup was against the law. "How's that?" said Uncle. "By royal order of King Philip," repeated the soldier. "I am sent here to tell you that soup has been outlawed in the kingdom of Dor. You will, by order of the king, never again consume soup, nor will you think of it or talk about it, and I, as one of the king's loyal servants, am here to take from you your spoons, your kettle, and your bowls." "But that can't be," said Uncle. "Nevertheless, it is." "What'll we eat? And what'll we eat it with?" "Cake," suggested the soldier, "with a fork." "And wouldn't that be lovely," said Uncle, "if we could afford to eat cake?" The soldier shrugged. "I am only doing my duty. Please hand over your spoons, your bowls, and your kettle." Uncle grabbed hold of his beard. He let go of his beard and grabbed the hair on his head. Unbelievable, he shouted. I suppose next the king will be wanting my sheep and my girl, seeing as those are the only possessions I have left. Do you own a girl? Said the soldier. I do, said Uncle. A worthless one, but still she is mine. Ah, said the soldier, that, I am afraid, is against the law, too. No human may own another in the kingdom of Dor. But I paid for her fair and square with a good laying hen and a handful of cigarettes and a blood-red tablecloth. No matter, said the soldier, it is against the law to own another. Now, you will hand over to me, if you please, your spoons, your bowls, your kettle, and your girl. Or if you choose not to hand over these things, then you will come with me to be imprisoned in the castle dungeon. Which will it be? And that is how Maigre Rousseau came to be sitting in a wagon full of soup-related items next to a soldier of the king. Do you have parents? Said the soldier. I will return you to them. Eh? "Ama!" shouted the soldier. "Dead!" said Meg. "Your pa?" shouted the soldier. "I ain't seen him since he sold me." Remember Meg's ears from receiving the clouts or the hits by Uncle. She can't hear very well. "Right, I'll take you to the castle then." "Gore," said Meg, looking around the wagon in confusion. "You want me to paddle?" "To the castle!" shouted the soldier. "I'll take you to the castle." "The castle where the itty-bitty princess lives?" "That's right." "Gore," said Meg, "I aim to be a princess too some day." "That's a fine dream," said the soldier. He clucked to the horse and tapped the reins, and they took off. "I'm happy to be going," said Meg, putting a hand up and gently touching one of her cauliflower ears. "Might just as well be happy, seeing as it doesn't make a difference to anyone but you if you are or not," said the soldier. "We will take you to the castle, and they will set you up fine. You no longer will be a slave. You will be a paid servant." "Eh?" said Meg. "You will be a servant," shouted the soldier, "not a slave." "Gore," said Meg, satisfied. "A servant I will be, not a slave." She was 12 years old. Her mother was dead. Her father had sold her. Her uncle, who wasn't her uncle at all, had clouded her until she was almost deaf. And she wanted more than anything in the world to be a little princess wearing a golden crown and riding a high-stepping white horse. Reader, do you think that is a terrible thing to hope when there is really no reason to hope at all? Or is it, as the soldier said about happiness, something that you might just as well do, since in the end it really makes no difference to anyone but you? So what do you think, guys? Do you think it's worth it to hope for things? Why or why not? All right, we got 2 more chapters to read. Chapter 29. Start with the kersey and finish with a thread. Maigre Rousseau's luck continued. On her first day on the job as a castle servant, she was sent to deliver a spool of red thread to the princess. "Mind," said the head of the serving staff, a dour woman named Louise. "She is royalty, so you must make sure you curtsy." "How's that?" shouted Meg. "You must curtsy," shouted Louise. "Gore," said Meg. "Yes'm." She took the spool of thread from Louise and made her way up the golden stairs to the princess's room, talking to herself as she went. "Here I am, off to see the princess. Me, Maigre Rousseau, seeing the princess up close and personal-like. And first off, I must curtsy because she is royalty." At the door to the princess's room, Meg had a sudden crisis of confidence. She stood a moment, clutching the spool of thread and muttering to herself. "Now how did that go?" she said. "Give the princess the thread and then give her a curtsy? No. First the curtsy and then the thread. That's it. Gore, that's right. That's the order. Start with the curtsy and finish with the thread." She knocked at the princess's door. "Enter," said the P. Meg, hearing nothing, knocked again. "Enter," said the P. And Meg, still hearing nothing, knocked yet again. Maybe, she said to herself, the princess ain't to home. But then the door was flung wide, and there was the princess herself staring right at Maigre Rousseau. "Gore," said Meg, her mouth hanging open. "Hello," said the P. "Are you the new serving maid? Have you brought me my thread?" "Curtsy, I must," shouted Meg. She gathered her skirts, dropped the spool of thread, stuck a foot out, and stepped on the spool, rocked back and forth for what seemed like quite a long time, both to the watching princess and the rocking Mig, and finally fell to the floor with a Miggish thud. Whoopsie, said Mig-Riso. The pea could not help it. She laughed. That's all right, she said to Mig, shaking her head. It's the spirit of the thing that counts. How's that? Shouted Mig. It's the spirit of the thing that counts, shouted Pea. Thank you, miss, said Mig. She got slowly to her feet. She looked at the princess. She looked down at the floor. First the kersey, then the thread, Mig muttered. Pardon? Said the Pea. Gore, said Mig, the thread! She dropped to her hands and knees to locate the spool of thread. When she found it, she stood back up and offered it to Pea. I brought you your thread, didn't I? Lovely, said the princess as she took the thread from Mig. Thank you so much. I cannot seem to hold on to a spool of red thread. Every one I have disappears somehow. 5th grade, where do you think the red is going? Who's using it? The mice, right? When they throw mice in the dungeon, they use the red thread. Are you making a thing? Asked Mig, squinting at the cloth in the Pea's hand. I am making a history of the world, my world, said the Pea. In tapestry, see? Here is my father the king, and he is playing the guitar because that is something he loves to do and does quite well. And here is my mother, the queen, and she is eating soup because she loved soup. Soup! Gore! That's against the law! Yes, said the princess. My father outlawed it because my mother died while she was eating it. Your ma's dead? Yes, said the Pea. She died just last month. She bit her bottom lip to stop it from trembling. Ain't that the thing, said Mig. My ma's dead too. How old were you when she died? Bold was I? Said Mig, taking a step back away from the princess. I'm sorry then. No, how old? How old were you? Shouted the Pea. Not but 6, said Mig. I'm sorry, said the princess. She gave Mig a quick, deep look of sympathy. How old are you now? 12 years. So am I, said the princess. We're the same age. What is your name? She shouted. Miggery so, but most people just calls me Mig. And I saw you once before, princess. You passed me by on a little white horse. On my birthday it was, and I was in the field with Uncle's sheep, and it was sunset time. Did I wave to you? Asked the princess. Eh? Did I wave? Shouted the Pea. Yes, nodded Mig. But you didn't wave back, said the princess. I did, said Mig, only you didn't see. Some day I will sit on a little white horse and wear a crown and wave. Some day, said Mig, and she put up a hand to touch her left ear. I will be a princess too. Really, said the Pea, and she gave Mig another quick, deep look, but said nothing else. When Mig finally made her way back down the golden stairs, Louise was waiting for her. How long, she roared, did it take you to deliver a spool of thread to the princess? Too long? Guessed Mig. That's right, said Louise, and she gave Mig a good clout to the ear. You are not destined to be one of our star servants. That is already abundantly clear. No, ma'am, said Mig. That's all right, though, because I aim to be a princess. You? A princess? Don't make me laugh. This reader was a little joke on Louise's part, as she was not a person who laughed. Ever. Not even at a notion as ridiculous as Mig-Riso becoming a princess. Chapter 30, To the Dungeon. Alright, so this is our last chapter before we start today. At the castle, for the first time in her young life, Mig had enough to eat, and eat she did. She quickly became plump and then plumper still. She grew rounder and bigger. Only her head stayed small. Reader, as the teller of this tale, it is my duty from time to time to utter some hard and rather disagreeable truths. In the spirit of honesty, then, I must inform you that Mig was the tiniest bit lazy. And, too, she was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. That is, she was a bit slow-witted. Because of these shortcomings, Louise was hard-pressed to find a job that Mig-Riso could efficiently perform. In quick succession, Mig failed as a lady-in-waiting. She was caught trying on the gown of a visiting duchess. A seamstress, she sewed the cloak of the riding master to her own frock and ruined both. And as a chambermaid, sent to clean a room, she stood open-mouthed and delighted, admiring the gold walls and floors and tapestries, exclaiming over and over again, "Gore, ain't it pretty? Gore, ain't it something then?" and did no cleaning at all. And while Mig was trying and failing at these many domestic chores, other important things were happening in the castle. The rat in the dungeon below was pacing and muttering in the darkness, waiting to take his revenge on the princess. And upstairs in the castle, the princess had met a mouse, and the mouse had fallen in love with her. Will there be consequences? You bet. Just as Mig's inability to perform any job well had its consequences. For, finally, as a last resort, Louise sent Mig to the kitchen, where Cook had a reputation for dealing effectively with difficult help. In Cook's kitchen, Mig dropped eggshells in the pound cake batter. She scrubbed the kitchen floor with cooking oil instead of cleanser. She sneezed directly on the king's pork chop moments before it was to be served to him. Of all the good-for-nothings I have encountered, shouted Cook, surely you are the worst, the most cauliflower-eared, the good-for-nothingest. There's only one place left for you. The dungeon. Eh? Said Meg, cupping a hand around her ear. You are being sent to the dungeon. You are to take the jailer his noonday meal. That will be your duty from now on. Reader, you know that the mice of the castle feared the dungeon. Must I tell you that the humans feared it too? Certainly it was never far from their thoughts. In the warm months, a foul odor rose out of its dark depths and permeated the whole of the castle. And in the still, cold nights of winter, terrible howls issued from the dark place, as if the castle itself were weeping and moaning. It's only the wind, people of the castle assured each other. Nothing but the wind. Many a servant girl had been sent to the dungeon bearing the jailer's meal, only to return white-faced and weeping, hands trembling, teeth chattering, insisting that they would never go back. On page 155, you can see Mig there, and the cook telling her that she needs to go to the dungeon. And worse, there were whispered stories of those servant girls who had been given the job of feeding the jailer, who had gone down the stairs and into the dungeon, and who had never been seen or heard from again. Do you believe that this will be Mig's fate? Gore, I hope not. What kind of a story would this be without Mig? Listen, you cauliflower-eared fool, shouted Cook. This is what you do. You take the tray of food down to the dungeon, and you wait for the old man to eat the food, and then you bring the tray back up. Do you think that you can manage that? Aye, I reckon so, said Mig. I take the old man the tray, and he eats what's on it, and then I bring the tray back up. Empty it would be then. I bring the empty tray back up from the deep downs. That's right, said Cook. Seems simple, don't it? But I'm sure you'll find a way to bungle it up. Eh? Said Meg. Nothing, said Cook. Good luck to you. You'll be needing it. She watched as Mig descended the dungeon stairs. They were the very same stairs, reader, that the mouse Despereaux had been pushed down the day before. Unlike the mouse, however, Mig had a light on the tray with the food. There was a single flickering candle to show her the way. She turned on the stairs and looked back at Cook and smiled. That cauliflower-eared good-for-nothing fool, said Cook, shaking her head. What's to become of someone who goes into the dungeon smiling, I ask you? Reader, for the answer to Cook's question, you must read on. And we will be reading on, just not today. So, what do you think's going to happen when Mig goes into that dungeon? Remember, Despereaux was pushed down those stairs the day before. And what happened when Despereaux was in the dungeon? He met Gregory, and where did we leave Despereaux in that first book? He was with Gregory the jailer, right? Well, do you think he'll still be with Gregory the jailer? Do you think Mig and Despereaux will meet? And Mig has a light on her tray. Which character might that light attract? What character may come out of the darkness to see the light? All right, we are going to leave it there. Nice job.